there's certainly some things that I came away with, but I'm more interested in what you took away from that press conference.
So first, a completely credible witness. I mean, he struck me just watching him as someone who was just emoting everything he was feeling. It was completely genuine. He says he hadn't had a lot of contact with them since 2006. So he's in a somewhat limited ability to speak to their motive, but he did speculate that the motive was not an ideology and certainly not religion. It wasn't uniquely Chechen. It was more being, quote, he used the term repeatedly, being losers and hatred of those who were able to settle in to their new homeland, the United States. And
he talked about how they must have been radicalized.
Yeah, he claims not to know exactly, but he thinks what drives them is a feeling of disaffection with their home country, whereas he is completely the opposite end of the American dream. He's now an American
patriot.
Yeah, and frankly, this sense of disaffection, it's never the sole causal factor, but it is frequently seen in foreign nationals who come to the United States, don't fit in, or have issues at home or issues with their work life, and end up going down this road and becoming radicalized in one way or another.
I'm just going to read from some of my notes, Richard, and I want you to respond to them. Came from Kyrgyzstan. We heard this morning from Interfax, the Russian news agency, that they'd come from Kazakhstan. If it's Kyrgyzstan and not Kazakhstan, what does that mean?
Kyrgyzstan borders Afghanistan, and we have a major logistical hub that funnels soldiers and equipment into the Afghan war through Kyrgyzstan, not Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan's much smaller, frankly, is a more Muslim country, not that that matters, than Kazakhstan. And what it appears is these were a somewhat rootless group of two kids who, though ethnic Chechens, that's now, at least the uncle says this, he says they never lived in Chechnya. And the one was born in Uzbekistan, and then the next Slavic republic over is Kyrgyzstan, and then somehow they got to the United States. So in their early years, they were drifting around the southern fringes of the former Soviet Union.
And what about the fact that he says anyway, that they received asylum?
Interesting, if he's right. I mean, if he's right, asylum is a particular immigration status. Coming from Kyrgyzstan, not sure how they got it, but maybe that they were Chechens and couldn't return home. Asylum is a case where the U.S. government believes you're being persecuted and can't go back to your home country, and therefore you were let in. The type of screening that the U.S. government applies to asylum seekers, it was very controversial. And in the period that they entered, as when I was in the White House, we were actually reviewing those policies, there was a sense that asylum seekers might not be subject to the same level of scrutiny as normal applicants for visitor visas or student visas, and it was increased. We were worried, frankly, in the 2002-2003 period about the conditions under which we were granting asylum and to whom. So that may be consequential here as the full lineage of this case is developed.
And going back to you, Peter Cook, our chief Washington correspondent, this gentleman, Ruslan Tsarny, the uncle of the suspected terrorist, says he has no idea how children born to his own brother could have possibly done this.
Yeah, that's right. And as we just heard, he consistently referred to them as losers. That was the only reason, the only motivation he could think of that they couldn't get settled into this country, that was the only motivation he could come up with. One thing I did want to point out as I listened to him carefully, he did say that they'd been born in Kyrgyzstan, but he also indicated at one point, I heard him say that he had spent time, at least one of these suspects had spent time in Dagestan and had perhaps spent more time there recently before he came to the United States. And I would ask Richard Falkenrath, again, the significance of that and what that does, again, to this equation.
Dagestan is the most ethnically diverse part of the former Soviet Union. No single group comprises more than 5 or 10% of the total population, and it's right next to Chechnya. It's between Chechnya and the Caspian Sea. And if they were refugees from the Chechen conflict in the early, late 1990s, that would be a logical place for the family to flee to. But frankly, it is itself a war-torn area, and it would make sense then to keep moving eastward into one of the other republics that presumably was more peaceful, Kyrgyzstan, before coming to the United States.
So, Richard, let's go back to the question we tackled earlier. Now that we know a bit more about these two men, 26 years old, 19 years old, both brothers, ethnic Chechens who may not have spent any time in Chechnya, maybe in Kyrgyzstan, maybe in Uzbekistan, Dagestan, whatever the case may be. Can we say anything about their affiliation?
Not yet.
Not yet. Still not yet.
That process, the dynamic of radicalization could have occurred out with the two of them acting alone, or could have occurred with the assistance of a foreign network of some kind. We do not know that yet. And you can guarantee that with the national security team for President Obama converging on the Situation Room in the White House, that will be topic one.